So thank you for joining us. Those of you who are in person and on the webinar, all of you should have a folder with you today. On the left-hand side, you'll find a list of our trainings along with some special flyers for extra trainings that we have. On the right-hand side, you're going to find your handout, page for notes, and as well as an evaluation that we ask that you fill out before leaving today. All right, so joining us through the webinar today is going to be Maria Dennison. She has been supporting Southwest Kansas for 3 years as our regional director. Also with us today is Ashley Stills, who is our Dodge City advisor. Ashley joined the SBDC this year and is eager to help grow the DC area. Last, of course, is myself. My name is Anna Paget, and I've been with the SBDC for a year, serving as the liberal advisor. The SBDC is a development center that helps entrepreneurs get started and assists small businesses in growing. Our center is responsible for the 22 Southwest counties. The Kansas SBDC is a grant program, which means that we are a free program to our clients. We are funded by the SBA, KDOT, the Dodge City Ford County Development Corporation, and locally through Seward County and the City of Liberal. We also have an outreach center here in Dodge City at the depot where Ashley assists our clients. There are 8 centers across all of Kansas. Each is attached to an institute of higher learning. The reason that we do this is that we can pool our resources and offer our talents and skills as advisors to our host institution while using their resources to better assist our clients. The SBDC primarily helps businesses open, but we also assist them in growing and expanding. Although we cannot do the work for our clients, we get the pleasure of walking them through the process hand in hand. We go at our clients' speeds, whether you want to open your doors within a year or take it slow and open in 3 years, we're here to help. We deal with all manners of industries. Sometimes we have a client that is working in an industry that we have never experienced. This means that we are learning right alongside our clients. We are always open and honest if we do not know the answer to a question. Thankfully, thanks to our great network of partners and fellow SBDC centers, the answers are never far from reach. Maria, if you would like to introduce our presenter today.
Sure. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Mac Monroe. As you can tell from our conversation, I've known Mac for a couple of years. I was honored in being able to introduce him 2 years ago at a SHRM HR conference. Mac is an expert in supervisory development business. And through his company, Boss Builders, he's been working to develop the next generation of great bosses. He's the author of How to Build Better Bosses and How to Win at Performance Management, 4 other business books, and he's the creator of numerous personality and behavioral assessments. He has a popular podcast called HR Oxygen, which can be found on all major podcast apps and at hroxygen.com. Mac enjoys spending time with his wife, 2 dogs, 3 cats, and away from the world on his 32-acre secluded wooded property in Van Lear, Tennessee. He delights in the fact that his nearest neighbor is over a mile away. Mac's one and only claim to fame is that he was on the TV show Romper Room as a 6-year-old back in 1970. Try as he might, he has yet to recapture the glory of that moment. Please let's welcome our speaker today, Mac Monroe.
All right, thank you, Maria, and thank you all for the opportunity to chat with you today. This is a talk that I typically give to HR professionals and to companies who are interested in building better bosses. Now, I know that today's audience is a little bit different, and so what I'm going to try to do is cover a lot of different things in our time together and frame it into something that'll be very useful for you. So if you are somebody right now who works for a company and you're thinking about starting a business one day, or you've started one on the side, eventually you're going to need to learn how to manage that. And you're going to need to learn how to recruit and manage people and how to even recruit and manage other managers. So we'll be covering that today. For some of you, you are already in that position and you're looking for some skills and some additional knowledge that'll help you be a better boss. And so we're going to give you some information for that. And some of you just want the opportunity to be in a group and network. And so this is your opportunity as well. And so in the next hour, and I wasn't up here just coloring for the sake of coloring, this is actually our roadmap here. And so what we're going to start with is we want to actually look at mistakes. All right. And so one of the reasons I stay in business is because people, as they start figuring out better ways to create better bosses, they don't do it very well. And so I want to share some of the common mistakes that people make. And for those of you who have a vision for your business, that down the line you'll be hiring lots of managers and developing them, I want to get you to do it the right way so you don't make costly mistakes. So we're going to start with mistakes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to focus on high potential. The goal here is that we want to help you build better bosses. And to do that, we have to actually start with the right raw materials. You know, you could have the best recipe on the planet, but it's going to take like dog food if you don't have good ingredients. So we want to make sure we have the right ingredients. I'm going to show you how to spot high potential. And then the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is building bosses. All right. So building bosses. And then with our remaining time at the end, we also want to focus on leaders. And so we'll go ahead and we'll be using this format. If you do have a handout and something to write with, go ahead and take some notes. If you're brave and you have colored pencils, you can use that too. But why don't we go ahead and shift over to the first page. And there's some fill in the blanks here, and we'll do some talking about this. But the first thing I want us to look at is something that maybe you've seen before. And by the way, since eye contact's hard to make on Zoom, we've taken care of that. So I'm a little tired, so the eyes are somewhat bloodshot, but just know I'm looking at you, so don't go asleep, right? I'm gonna see you. But let's take a look at the infographic. I've seen this on LinkedIn a bunch of times, and what it tells us, looking at it this way, is that there is indeed a difference between bosses and leaders. In fact, if you were to look at it this way, you would see that the bosses typically are bad and mean. Look at that mean face right there. And then leaders are good, although I see this little winking eye, and that's a little creepy for me. But if we look at these, it's a little compare and contrast. And so while bosses drive employees, leaders will coach them. And you could go right across and see this. And what's interesting about this is that I think it tells the story of how a lot of people look at managers. And unfortunately, a lot of people give the boss a bad rap. And I truly don't believe that the opposite of a boss is a leader. I really think that some of the traits that are listed here, and you may disagree with me, but I think some of these are actually really good traits. After all, there's going to be a time and a place for you to drive employees and depend on your authority. And I would also suggest inspire fear. Doesn't mean you're going to torture people, but there's got to be consequences. Sometimes it's even important to take credit. But when I say take credit, what I really mean is ownership. So all of these traits are traits of a boss. And for those of you that don't agree with me that there's a difference between boss and leaders, and I think there is, but the difference would be the boss list. So for the sake of our time together today, why don't we just pretend for a moment that these are traits of a bad boss. And so the opposite of a bad boss is not a leader. The opposite of a bad boss is a good boss. And what we want to spend most of our time figuring out is how to make good bosses. And then from that, we're going to get our leader pool. That's how we're going to work it. Now, the first thing we want to look at then is the mistakes. So the big question you probably want to know is, well, you probably want to know when we're going to be done so you can get back to work. But maybe a bigger question is going to be, how do we do this the right way? And how do you know, Mac, what the right way is? Well, the reason that I kind of know is because up until this pandemic year, I was on the road 35 weeks working with people all over the US and international, most of the time trying to help them wrestle with this problem. And in many cases, they had started out and did it wrong. So if you're thinking about your own business and wanting to be as good as you can managing your finances, you do not want to make costly mistakes. These are the 6 biggest mistakes you can make. I'm going to help you understand what they are. You'll fill in the blanks, and then I'll explain why these are so costly. So we're going to do it David Letterman style. We're going to start at the top and work our way down to the most important one down here. So why don't we start with number 6? The number 6 biggest reasons that people screw up building better bosses is they confuse management training with management development. Management training with management development. And I know that some of you are thinking, well, aren't those the same thing? Well, no, they're actually very different. It's kind of like comparing a bowling ball and an apple, right? They're both round, but that's about as similar as you can get. Now, I'm not going to tell you why that's a mistake right now. You're going to see that a couple of pages from now. So just hang on to this one. We'll talk about this in great detail, I promise. Mistake number 5 then is using a piecemeal approach. Oops, piecemeal approach. Now, what I say by a piecemeal approach is that if you're going to do management training and management development, it can't be done in a vacuum. It really has to be part of a larger picture. And the companies that do the worst at this are the ones that tend to buy products to train their manager on hot topics at the time. And so maybe right now, one of the hottest topics out there in training are topics around diversity and inclusion. And there's nothing wrong with those topics at all. They're necessary topics. But what the challenge is that most managers don't have time, energy, or interest in going to training. And if every time they turn around, you've got some new topic they've got to be trained on, pretty soon they're going to be turned off to it. So what I would suggest is having a structure, a sequence, a plan. And I'm going to show you how to put that plan together today so that you can make sure there's a good pipeline of talent. But if you just take things and throw it against the wall and see what sticks, most everything is going to hit the floor and you're going to spend money on resources that are not used and not taken advantage of. So please don't make the mistake with number 5. Now, number 4 is making your management training theoretical. Theoretical. Now, theory has one purpose on this earth. And the purpose of theory, at least from my perspective, is so academics can sit in a room together and argue about who's the smartest one in the group. Theory is something that is done with research, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for the tactical, practical business owner that's in the mindset of making money and getting new customers, you don't have time or energy for theory. And your managers are probably overwhelmed with problems. And the last thing they're going to need is a long, boring training class full of theory. You could think about it the way you look at YouTube, right? If you're like most normal human beings, if you run across something in your house that needs repair and you don't feel like calling somebody, first place you go is to YouTube, right? And you try to find a video to show you how to do something. Maybe it's replacing the flapper valve in your toilet, right? So you go to YouTube, and if you're like most people, you try to find the shortest video you can find. You don't want to spend an hour watching a long presentation because you have an immediate problem that needs to be fixed. So you look for the shortest video with a step-by-step, you watch it, you learn it, you do it, you move on. And I would really encourage you to think about making any type of management training and development initiatives just like that. Make them quick, full of impact and quick so we can get back to making money. If you don't want to do that, you will lose money and lose interest, which is probably the last thing that you want to do. And that's mistake number 4. Now, number 3 is a little bit of a crazy one. And so we have to be careful with this because this one actually impacts me. But there is an operative word that we want to highlight, and that's this one right here. Number 3 is blindly outsourcing to an outside vendor. Now, I am actually an outside vendor. I make a living selling training. But what I never want to do is work with a company who has blindly selected me. And the reason I say that is because the way that we tend to do business is we have a structure to it. But what a lot of people tend to do is they have an immediate problem and they want to throw money at it. And a vendor typically is in the business to make money. And so when you just leave it up to a vendor to figure out what you need for training, well, then you've given them full control. You've basically opened up your wallet and said, hey, take whatever you need out of here. We just have this problem that needs to be solved. Well, as business owners, you and me, we know that capital is one of those things you got to hang on to. So you can't spend it foolishly. We want to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So what I would suggest before using an outside vendor is figure out exactly what it is we want to accomplish if we're going to train our managers. And once we've done that, we can find a vendor that has the pieces that fit in. But we'd never want to lose control of that and give it to the vendor, because the vendor's job, and there's nothing wrong with this, is to sell you the max amount of training they can at the highest possible price point. So can't fault them, can't fault me. That's how we make a living. But but I want you to get the best value. So please don't make mistake number 3. Now, mistake number 2 is treating training like a flu shot. There's a lot of vendors that I know that they sell something called a boot camp, right? A management boot camp, a leadership boot camp. And what you do is you cram a whole bunch of training into like a 2-day block of time. And then what you do is you check it off the list and say, well, we took care of our management training this year. Well, that's like a flu shot, isn't it? We get a flu shot usually in the late fall, and our hope is that it protects us against the flu through the flu season, which goes through the winter and the spring. And then during the summer, it kind of wears off, and then we have to get another one. But it's those times in that long period that we start to lose that immunity. And you know, the same thing applies with training. If you do an event, you're going to have people forget shortly after. In fact, I would suggest that everything we're talking about today, by this time next week, you will probably have forgotten at least half of what we talked about today. You'll remember the bald guy that's coloring, and you'll remember he drew eyes on his hand, and you'll remember a few stories, but the information and knowledge leaves you. So this is why we don't want to just get it done and check it off the list. We got to make sure that it's ongoing. Think of it not as a flu shot, but maybe as a wellness program. And if we can do that, there's a good chance we're going to get our talent developed. But the last mistake, I think, is the biggest one, which is why I put it here at number 1. And this is one that when I say it, you're probably going to say, well, you just lost me there because I cannot believe you said what you just said. But I'm going to say it anyway. So here it is. Mistake number 1 is assuming everyone needs to be a leader. And I know for some of you, you can't believe you just heard that. But I firmly believe this. And the reason I do that is because when I think of bosses and leaders, what I often think of is that the boss is the tactical person, the guy or the girl that makes the trains run on time. And leaders tend to be the ones at the top of an organization that are the strategic folks. They're the ones that are out there helping us define the playing field. For many of you that own a business or will do that in the future, your job is to figure out where the revenue streams are going to come from in the future. How are we going to be able to attract new customers? Your job should not be focusing on the day-to-day operations. That's not your role. But what would your organization be like if everybody was up there on top of the mountain looking out there for the next opportunity? And who's going to take care of the current customers? Who's going to make sure that everything is running as it should? I'm going to suggest that there shouldn't be everybody here. Now, certainly everybody can practice some of the techniques of leadership, but in terms of the leader, the strategic viewpoint, that can't be everybody. So I know that I might have lost a few of you already, and that's okay. Just humor me and stick with me a little longer. And I promise that this is going to start making sense to you. So first of all, let's determine that bosses and leaders are good, okay? There's no point trying to play them against each other because that's just a dumb thing to do. And please don't make the 6 biggest mistakes. But if you do want to develop that pipeline, then stay with me, because step number 1 is for us to determine what high potential employees look like. And taking those, how do we develop them into the bosses that we need, and then a select few of those into the leaders that we're going to be having to use in the future. To do that, let's go ahead and go to the next page of your handout. Now this one here has got a lot of shapes in it, and we're going to go ahead and fill everything in for you. But what we suggest is really 3 steps as you are building this talent to be able to run your organization. And it all begins with the very first group that we want to focus on, and those are people that we would consider to be high potential. High potential. See if we can fit it all in there. Somebody who is high potential has traits, and you may have a gut feeling that somebody has high potential. Gut feelings are really good, but what if we were to go ahead and give you some criteria? I think that would be better, because then you could measure people against your criteria. So I've got 6 criteria or 7 criteria of high potential. And you know what? You can use this as you are hiring people, because I think these traits are good for any employee. And then we're going to take a percentage of these and we're going to roll these into being great bosses. But let's start with the traits of high potential. So trait number 1 of high potential is this one here. Somebody with high potential does their job, and then they do more than just their job. As a small business owner, you can relate to this, can't you? Because you do pretty much everything in your business. And for the longest time, I did too, until I hired Rachel and Lisa. But this is the mark of a high potential person, isn't it? And I remember years ago when I was a kid and I got my first job, my dad told me, he says, let me tell you the secret to being a great, successful employee. Do your job, and when you're done, go find something else to do. Don't just sit around and wait for the boss to tell you what to do. So a self-starter, they do more than just their job. That's trait number one. Now here's trait number two. They are comfortable, challenging norms. Now, what we're not advocating here is for somebody to be disruptive and to try to change and flip everything upside down. But what we want is people who come in with maybe an objective look at what we've been doing for the longest time and asking, hey, how can we do that? And if you say, well, I don't know, we've just always done it that way before, well, then these people are probably going to say, well, have you ever thought about looking at it this way? Remember, whatever we do now as a best practice, there was a time and a place it was something new and scary. And after a while, it just became the norm. But every norm, after a while, has a shelf life, doesn't it? And so we have to adapt and move forward. So we want people who are going to push us a little bit respectfully. And of course, you're going to have to manage that piece of it. The third trait of high potential is somebody who would take ownership. I know that you've probably run across arrogant employees in your time, and maybe under your breath you says, you know what, that person walks around here like they own the damn place. But you know what? That's not always a bad thing, isn't it? I remember when I was in the Navy, and I'm not proud of this. If you tell somebody, they'll probably come and arrest me. But I got to tell you, when I was in the Navy, I had no problem whatsoever bringing home paper, staplers, pencils, pens, sticky notes, whatever. Didn't matter to me because you know what? I could care less. I didn't own anything. And hey, the government bought it and there's extra and I could use it at home. I had no problem, never lost a wink of sleep over it. But I'll never forget when I started my business and my daughter, who's now 21, was just a little kid. And she came down the stairs and she went in my home office and opened up my printer and pulled out a stack of my printer paper and ran upstairs. I said, hey, where are you going with that? She says, well, I'm going to go color with this. I said, Allison, that's my work paper. I bought that. And suddenly the light came on. And I realized when I owned the business, I counted for that paper because I had to buy it. And you know what? When you have employees that treat your business like it's their business and put the care and concern and, you know, the frugalness that you put in, man, that's a keeper right there. So look for people that act like they own the damn place because they're going to give you better effort. Next one is you have people who will actually pursue learning off the job. Look for people who tell you, hey, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually taking some college courses. I'm actually looking to get a couple of certifications because I want to be better at my job. Or, hey, I've been listening to some really good podcasts on how to be a better manager. All right, those are people that have potential because they're taking their personal time and they're enhancing their own careers. And you can tell a lot about a person by how much effort they put into their own development. So there's another trait right there. Here's another one for you. They display curiosity. These are the kind of people who don't just accept that this is the way we've always done things. They'll ask, well, I'm just curious, whoever came up with that idea? How did you determine that was the best practice? And even though these people can be annoying, and some of them frankly are, and I know this because this used to be me when I was in the Navy. Imagine doing all this in uniform. That didn't go over very well, but I couldn't help myself. That's just naturally who I am. But you want to find people like that because their curiosity means they care. They want to do a good job. They are also process improvers. Rather than just complain about how things are, what they say they're going to do is they're going to figure out ways to do it better. And maybe those ways work and maybe they don't, but you can't fault them for the effort. Of course, this is where you want to make sure that you're, alongside them so you can kind of guide them through this. And maybe the last one seems like Captain Obvious to you, but do they want it? And when I say they want it, that is maybe a promotion into the ranks of managers. Is this something that they are interested in? Is this something that they would actually like to do well? And if you can find people like this, and this means you're going to have to recruit people like this, hey, they are really good to have around. I am fortunate to have 2 employees who do this, and they call me out all the time. And I told them that they can do that, and they take me up on that offer. But you know what? They do it because they have a vested interest in my business. Sometimes Lisa, I think, treats my business like it's her business. And I have to sometimes ask myself, hey, I thought I was the boss. Am I still the boss around here? But things get done well. So talent, those of you who are managing already and looking for new techniques, if you were to take the time to just build people, man, that's a huge piece of it right there. In fact, that leads us to the next thing we want to talk about as we are developing our employees and looking to get them into roles in management. The second thing that we have to do after we've identified our critical audience is we have to tell them what the expectations are. So this one here is about talent. And then this one over here is expectations. When I work with managers that are not good, the question that I always ask them is, when you got promoted to manager, did anybody take the time to tell you what they expected you to do in this role? And inevitably, the worst managers that I ever work with are ones that tell me no. They just told me to figure it out as I went along because that's the way I learned how to do it. And you know what? You would never want to go to a surgeon and say, hey, how did you learn how to do a colonoscopy? Oh, I don't know. I just read a few books. I mean, what's involved? You stick a tube up somebody's rear end. I mean, how much more do you need to know? Well, there's a hell of a lot more to know, isn't there? So we want to make sure that we are actually setting the expectations and we're putting some effort into that development, because a manager that doesn't know the expectations is not going to do the job. Now, if you're wondering why I'm drawing fire in here, it's because this is a model I learned about when I was in the Navy. And I firmly believe, and you may disagree with me, because Kansas is kind of an army place, isn't it? But I think the Navy is the superior armed force. And the reason I say that is what happens when there's fire, okay? So we'll just pick on the Air Force, since everybody can agree that the Air Force should be picked on, at least in my circle. So let's say you're in the Air Force, right? You're probably in an office someplace sitting at a computer, you're doing your computing or whatever they do in the Air Force, and a fire breaks out. Well, you jump out of your seat and run over and pull the fire alarm and run out of the building screaming, right? But if you're on board a ship in the Navy and there's a fire, you drop whatever it is you're doing and you head toward the fire to put it out. Because if your ship goes down, your crews might go down with it. So we can't afford that. Now, what I would suggest then is that model of fighting fires, that's something we could use now. When we were in basic training, those instructors shared this model with us, and they said this is called the fire triangle. And what this means is that for every fire to burn, 3 elements have to be in place. So if you all know your fires, there is oxygen, heat, and fuel. And if those 3 elements are in place, any fire is going to burn. So if we want to put the fire out, we simply remove an element, okay? And what does that have to do with turning great employees into better bosses? Well, nothing. But if we use the model of the triangle, and maybe instead of a fire, we have this be the fire of a great boss, then we can determine what elements need to be in place. So for some of you listening to this right now, these are things for you to internalize. For those of you who want to build better bosses, this is what you're going to have to teach. And so there's 3 elements that make a person a great boss. Here's element number 1. You have to have the ability to solve problems. Solve problems. In fact, you know, most small business owners that I run across, the first thing that they do when they're trying to figure out a business is they're trying to figure out a problem that needs to be solved, and they want to create the solution to the problem and then have you pay them for the solution. And that's how I make a living. I look for problems and we have a solution. But you know, for most managers, this is their life too. It's solving problems. And so you need to hire people, you need to put people in place and show them that part of their role is to solve problems. This often is what gets people into these roles in the first place, because usually a problem solver is seen to be the one who is the best employee of the job. And that's fine. But there are two more elements that have to be in place for this great boss fire to burn. And it's more than just solving problems. Second one is what we refer to as protect the house. So protect the house. And the house, for our purposes, is your organization. And just like in the homes that we live in, most of us have some sort of security system, even if it's as simple as a lock, but we want to protect the contents of our house. An organization is like our house too, and we've got to protect it against threats. And usually there's about 3 threats that pop up that we have to protect against. So here's threat number 1. Threat number 1 is anything that is safety related. And it depends on, of course, the industry that you're in. You know, some of the industries I work with, they're clerical people, right? Their biggest danger is a paper cut or dropping a ream of paper on their toe. But I have other clients that manufacture the explosives used in a controlled demolition. Now you can imagine safety is a big deal for those folks. A second threat to your house is anything that is HR related. Things that can get you in a world of trouble, sexual harassment, discrimination. And you don't have to just rely on your HR business partner to take care of this. Each of you ought to be looking at this too, because these threats tend to happen in areas where HR is not looking. And the bottom line is, I don't know what life's like where you live, but every evening when I turn on the evening news, every second commercial is from a law firm, either talking about if you were injured in an accident, call me up, or if you were unfairly treated at work, call me up. There are an army of lawyers waiting to have this happen. So you've got to protect your house against that. That's threat number 2. Threat number 3 is anything reputation related. This is customer experience. I just did a talk this morning on customer experience for another client, because that's critical. And you have to be able to be tuned into that. And oftentimes there's a fourth, depends on the industry, but anything that's a threat of a regulatory nature. Maybe it's a financial institution where you got FINRA and the SEC to look at you, or regulations of some sort. But bottom line is, your folks need to know that they have to protect the house. That's a big responsibility. And third and final is the willingness and ability to develop people. And this is one where a lot of managers, they push back and they say, well, you know, I just don't have the time to do that. But this is a crucial part of this. And so if you individually are thinking about moving into the next level of management, or really looking at people who can do this for you, make sure that all 3 of these are met. Because just like the fire triangle, if only one gets booted out, the whole thing goes out. And folks, we can't afford that. The last thing we have to do before we get to the real meat of our presentation, with about 28 minutes left, is we have to determine the right motive if you want to move into this level. And so the third little diagram here is the motive. And you know what? This is really important, because the wrong motive or wrong motives can lead to a really bad fit in that position. And I bet that each of you right now could probably tell me in great detail the story of the worst boss you ever had. And in most of those cases, the person who's in that role as the worst boss ever probably got into it for the wrong reasons. So about 10 years ago now, I guess, it's been a while, I did a project with a customer of ours up in Massachusetts. And what they would do every year is they would do an employee survey. So they would send out surveys, employees would do them, and then they would they'd put all the data together and they'd kind of make some reports out. And then what would happen is they would look at every unit, every business unit, every department that scored low, and then they would dig deeper there. They would look at the manager's individual scores. And every manager that scored low, their prize was a 1-hour meeting with me. So I would fly up to Massachusetts and then Texas, Florida, and Michigan. And I would meet one-on-one with these low-scoring managers. And so first year I had probably 30. Second year, I had probably about that same amount. But you know, the third year, I sat down and I thought, wait a minute, these are the same people who I have talked to the last 2 years. In 3 years, they have still scored low. What's wrong with these people? And that's what I did when I did my last series of one-on-ones. I basically said, look, frankly, you suck at this job. Why in the world did you want this job in the first place? And that's when I began to discover the answer. And the answer I discovered is one that I want to share with you, because you've got to make sure people are in this for the right reasons. In fact, for some of you, you might have to do some introspection and ask yourself, why is it do I want to move to a higher level? So these were some of the answers that I got, and only a couple of these are worth pursuing. The first one I heard quite often is, I want to be the boss because I want to leave a legacy. Well, for those of you who have had a bad boss at least once in your career, and you can think about that person right now and you can remember everything about them, even the fact that they had bad breath. Well, that person left a legacy too, didn't they? They're the worst boss you ever had. You'll leave a mark. The question is, what kind of mark do you want to leave? And if you don't leave a mark, you're totally forgettable. And that's a mark in itself. So if somebody says, I want to be a manager because I want to leave a legacy, you'll leave one. You just better figure out the right one you want to leave. So be careful with that one. This next one, you run in the opposite direction. Well, I wanted to be the boss because I was the smartest one there. Holy cow, man, you're pretty full of yourself, aren't you? The problem with this is that this leads to narcissism. And man, you want to talk about having a headache? Work for a narcissist of a boss. I had one in my second job after I got out of the Navy. She was the vice president of human resources. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Devil Wears Prada. Well, this lady was just like that Miranda, whatever her last name was. She had the fancy shoes and the big shoulder pads, and she had a pink leather chair that matched this impressionist painting of pink flowers behind her. And man, she was full of herself and she was miserable to work for. So an ego is a tough thing. We want to have confidence in a person, but certainly not arrogance. So run the opposite direction here. Some of them told me, because I'm just reiterating what I heard from these bad managers, they were in it for the money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would also suggest that there's not enough money in the world to compensate a manager for the headaches that they're going to experience. It's just the nature of the role. So trust me, there's easier ways to make money than being the boss of somebody. So be careful with that one. For some people, they said it was respect. I want to be the boss because I want people to respect me. You know what? Respect is one of those things that is earned. You can't just assume it's going to happen here. And I can remember in my time in the Navy, there was a lot of officers that I couldn't stand. If they were on fire, I might not even put the fire out. They were so bad. But you know what? When they walked past me, I'd salute, but I wouldn't salute them. I'd salute the thing on their collar. That's not real respect, is it? You want to be respected, you've got to earn that respect. So be careful. If this is the reason you're in the job, you better be good. Some told me, and I think we could work with this, that being the boss was part of their personal vision. One person told me, ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be the boss. And a person like that at least would be open to changing. And I had to do some work with these individuals, and a couple of them managed to turn it around after the third year. One of them told me, this is crazy, they want to be the boss because they want to be in control of things. They wanted to have this ultimate power. And you'll have that as the boss. But you know what people say about power? With great power comes great responsibility. So you've got to be prepared for that part of it. And the last one I heard, and I think you can work with this one too, is, you know, I may not be good at it, but I always wanted to be the boss because I thought it was just part of a sense of duty. I just wanted to do it, you know, and somebody like that has the willingness, and I believe we could work with something like that. But, you know, the choice is going to be up to each of you. It's going to have to be something as you start thinking about talent, selecting talent, look for the traits that are going to work for you. I know that's an awful lot, and we haven't even got really to the core yet, but it's just like learning math. You have to start at the foundation and continue to add to it. So now that we've done step one, which is how do we select the right raw materials, let's move to step number two, where we're going to spend most of the remaining time we have together. And that is actually building better bosses. And for those of you who are not in this role, but you want to actually learn how to be a better boss, you're going to find some answers, especially as we start talking about development right here. One of the tools that is probably one of the best tools that I could offer to you is the one that we're going to start with. And it's this one right here in the middle. It's something that we refer to as the three-legged stool of great performance. The three-legged stool of great performance. So in any three-legged stool model, and you've probably seen a bunch of these because it's a pretty common metaphor, but in this one in particular, great performance is part of three strong legs. And so what we teach managers is that you can use this when you're dealing with underperforming employees. But for right now, we're going to use this as we talk about how to build better bosses. So there's three legs on our three-legged stool, and we got to make sure all three are in place or this thing is going to fall over. Now we're going to start with the middle one right here. We refer to this middle one here as the leg of will, which means that the person who we are going to invest in to be a better boss, that's a person who actually wants to do it. And you know, we addressed that in this prior one right here, didn't we? So we're going to make the assumption that whoever we're going to work with actually wants the job. If they don't want it, there's no point in even moving forward. You have to have that will to do it. But that does leave us with two other legs of our three-legged stool. So the leg over here is what we refer to as the leg of skill. Skill means we know how to do the job. And if somebody is facing a skill deficiency, the best way we can fix a skill problem is right here. It's through training. So if you are thinking about ways that you can better train your managers to do a better job, I have 4 suggestions here that work pretty well when you're trying to train your managers. Remember, training is for the transfer of skills. And if a person is skilled, it's because the training has stuck. So we've got to make sure it's good training. These are the things that I would suggest that would give you a better shot at having a good training program. The first one is that anything that you are going to use for training, the topic should be short, sweet, and to the point. Short, sweet, to the point. You're sitting with me for an hour this morning, and about an hour is about as long as you can keep a person before they start getting antsy on you. That's even a stretch at best. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a whole bunch of hours and hours and hours of training because people lose interest in that. Besides, if we're going to train a person on one skill, it shouldn't take all day. You should be able to do it fairly quickly. So short, sweet, and to the point. Second requirement is any topic should be a how-to topic. In fact, even the topic of our talk today is how to build better bosses, isn't it? So that would suggest with a how-to that you're going to learn some skills today. And hopefully in our first 40 minutes, you've learned a few skills. Then I would also suggest that your topics be simple, but not simplistic. We get this fairly often if we work with organizations that have really gifted people. I was working with one probably about 2 years ago, and these were environmental scientists, and their HR person told me, he says, Mac, these are some pretty high-level people. They're, in fact, the dumbest ones in the group only have 1 PhD. Many of them have 2 PhDs. So we need something high level. And I says, well, are they new to being a manager? He says, well, yeah, they're brand new. I says, well, then I don't need to give them PhD level because number one, I'm not a PhD. I don't even know what you do with a PhD, but I'm not a PhD. And the thing is, this is a whole new skill set. Now, at the time, my granddaughter, Eleonora, just learned how to go pee-pee on the potty. She was like 2. And I says, that's no different than me going over to see my granddaughter and say, hey, now that you know how to go pee on the potty, Grandpa Mac's going to show you how to run the chainsaw, right? She won't be ready for that. So we want to make sure that our topics are not way up there in the stars for someone that has a technical job. Supervision's a whole different animal. So simple, but don't treat people like they're stupid. And the final thing we want to do is we want to make the training ongoing. and we suggest something called a roundtable. Now, we have a bit of a roundtable this morning. You are all kind of there together in a group, but some of the best training things we've done has been small groups where people don't really get trained, but they come with questions, and we just sort of do a roundtable. And it's a chance to make the training topics actually resonate and stick. So if you're going to do training, make sure you're following the guidelines. But our third leg of our three-legged stool, this one over here, is what we call the leg of focus. Now, focus becomes an issue when somebody is highly skilled and motivated, but for whatever reason, they're still not successful. Oftentimes, it's because they have weird behaviors or the way they perform is not aligned with our corporate values. And in that case, training is not going to work. There's no point sending them to training to be more of a team player, and that's not going to work. But what would work are two different interventions. The first one would be coaching, and the second would be mentoring. And there's a difference between these two. So the first one we want to look at is coaching. And when we're coaching a person, we're not telling them what to do. We're not training them what to do. What we're doing is coming alongside them, and we're going to co-create solutions with them. Because if they're at this point, they already have the skills that they need. They just need some adjustments. And so when we're doing coaching, you're not going to show them what to do. You're going to work with them. That's assuming they have the technical skills. Now, mentoring is one that maybe some of you are a little bit more familiar with. And when I say mentoring, what I'm talking about is somebody who has already been at the level that you aspire to be at, who's done it successfully, who is willing to open up their vault of experience to you to help you get through your challenges. And a lot of people ask me, hey, Mac, who would you like to be your mentor? And they probably think I'm going to say, you know, some management guru or somebody, but I always say, no, I really would like to be mentored by Gene Simmons. And they say, that guy that plays for KISS that has the long tongue? Yeah, that's the one. See, the reason I want Gene Simmons to mentor me is not because I want to be a rock star. What I want to do is be better at marketing and promotion. And Gene Simmons is the best. They've got KISS memorabilia for sale at Graceland, in Elvis's house of all places. Now, marketing and promotion is something I'm not very good at. So I'll tell you a couple things. If Gene Simmons agreed to be my mentor, I can guarantee, number one, I'd never blow off a meeting. And number two, I'd come to the meeting prepared. I'd have questions and all kinds of things, and I would listen carefully. That's why when I say organic and self-driven, it's really important that an individual find somebody and say, I want to reach out to that person to be a mentor. And if we can do that, there's a good chance we're going to get great performance. But that does leave us with about 12 minutes left in our time together to explore what development looks like. And this is relevant for every single person who's listening to this today, because this is a very predictable pattern, and each and every one of you have gone through this, and you will go through it multiple times in your life. So what I'm drawing here is little three-legged stools of great performance, and they'll mirror this one. Remember the skill, will, and focus. So each of the leg segments are going to look a little different here. Look, this one has 3 cracked legs. This one's got 3 good ones, and this one looks weird. It's got a good one here and a cracked one right here. So what this represents for us, folks, is 6 levels of development. And this pertains to every single facet of life. It pertains to you as a manager, pertains to you as a business owner, pertains to you as an employee. It pertains to you as a parent. It pertains to you as somebody who might be in a personal relationship. The pattern is predictable, and it flows through these 6 areas. So very quickly, I can tell you that my son, Dustin, who is now he's 24, he was my classic case study in this. Because when he graduated from college in 2018, that boy was arrogant as all get out. And in his credit, he's a smart kid, and he happened to go to a top school for a top program. He graduated from the Ohio State University with a degree in supply chain and operations management. And he had multiple job offers, but he wanted Amazon. So he ended up doing interviews, got hired. And when he called me to tell me the good news, I heard a real tone of arrogance in his voice. And I said, well, Dustin, what are you going to be doing? He says, I'm going to be the area manager of single pack night shift. And I says, well, what's that mean? He says, well, I'm going to have a division. And what we do is when a person orders one item from Amazon and you put one in the box, that's the line I'm going to manage. I said, okay, are you going to have any direct reports? He says, well, yeah, of course. I said, well, how many? He said, well, they told me 80. And I says, do you have any idea what you just stepped in, boy? He said, what do you mean? I said, Dustin, I work with managers that have one direct report and they can't even handle that. How are you going to do 80? What do you even know about these people? He says, well, they're old like you, Dad, and most of them don't speak English. And I said, oh my God. See, in phase one, this is overconfidence, right? That looks like the legs are strong, but this is not even real. So what I'm going to recommend when somebody is new, you need to orient them. And I had to let him know, look, Dustin, you're in for a world of hurt here. This is a lot of work for you. And fortunately, he listened to me, and that moved him into phase two, which he was here all along. He was just being overconfident. Phase two is the beginning of something new. And usually you're excited. So look, the will leg is strong, but there's no skill and focus. This is where our job is to teach people. So if you want to know when teaching and training is most appropriate, it's right about here. And they sent him to training for 2 months in Tampa, and he told me how excited he was because, you know, the will leg is strong. And then when his 2 months of training were over and we helped him move down to his condo, I told him, hey, Dustin, I'm going to let you know you're going to want to quit this job in about 2 months. And he didn't believe me. And I said, trust me. And you know what? It was about 2 months later. I was in Iowa. I was going to speak at a conference, and he called me at 6:30 in the morning. He was just getting off work, and he was in a bad spot. He was right here. Look, there's no legs on that stool. In about 2 months into anything new, you're going to hit this wall. And he did. And he was almost in tears. And I said, Dustin, what are the 3 biggest problems you're struggling with? And he told me, and I thought, God, that's it. But remember, this is what I do for a living. You know, it's a good thing I'm not a plumber, right? So I told him, look, tell me the top 3 things. He told me, and I said, all right, get some paper and a pencil, and I want you to write down everything I tell you to do and do it exactly as I tell you. And I promise this problem will go away. And you know what? He did it. What I did is I micromanaged him. And I know that some of you don't like that word, but you know what? It's like being a lifeguard at the beach. When somebody yells for help, they don't want you to teach them how to swim. They want you to come and rescue them. And this is what he needed. And you know what? He listened intently. And it took me about 35, 40 minutes to talk him off the ledge, but it worked. The more time you can spend here, folks, the less painful this is, but you will always hit this. It's either going to look like a brick wall or it could be a speed bump, but it's up to each of you to learn how to manage it. Well, I managed to get him through that. He called me a couple of months later and he was having new challenges. He says, my employees are taking long bathroom breaks and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, let's work through it this way. But the difference was I'm not going to micromanage him forever. In fact, this is why most of us hate this word, don't we? We've been micromanaged to death. But he was growing. Notice the legs here are back, but they're cracked. They're developing. So I'm not going to just throw him to the wolves, but I'm not going to tell him what to do. What I did for him here is I coached him. And I didn't tell him what to do, but I asked him questions. I said, you know, why do you suppose the people are taking long bathroom breaks? And I said, hey, things are automated at Amazon. Is it possible that the people feel like they're being treated like machines? And he says, well, yeah, I think so. I said, well, what's one thing you could do to help the people feel more like humans? He says, well, I guess I could ask them what they like to do outside of work, build a rapport. And you know what? It worked. The reason I didn't tell him what to do is, number one, I knew that his strength was coming back. And what I didn't want to do is tell him what to do and have him rely on me every day and call me every single day with a management problem. Because he doesn't pay me. My clients pay me to do that. So like for my son, we already footed his college bill. That was enough. Well, the goal, folks, is to get to phase 5. Notice in phase 5, the legs are strong. You know what to do. You're confident. And all you need from people around you is simply support. And this is where he was. And he probably worked another 8-10 months there at Amazon. And then he hit stage 6. Stage 6 happens when you have a superstar because eventually they'll outgrow you. And what we have to do is look for the signs. A strong skill leg, the will leg is gone, focus leg is cracked. And at that point, we need to engage in a conversation and find out what's going wrong. In the case of my son, he was ready for a change. And so what he did is he took a job in Reno, Nevada, and he went right back over here and went through the same process all over again. The difference was the lessons he learned in his first round through, he kept those. And he didn't call me nearly as much in this second role. You know what? The more times all of us go through this, the more valuable and wise we become. I've learned lessons in business going through this that I'll never repeat the mistakes because I've gotten through them. But during the middle of it, where I wanted to quit, we've all been here, haven't we? So understand that. If we had 100 high potential, 100 employees, we might have 25 high potentials. Of the 25 that we are going to try to develop into bosses, we might have 2 that we think have potential for higher levels of leadership. And with those 2, I want to give you the last page of our handout because we're down to about 6 minutes left, and that is developing leaders. This one is smaller. This one is got a lot of less places for you to fill in blanks. And the reason I say that is because this is a topic all on its own. We're not going to spend a lot of time today, but I will give you some hints on what are the criteria that we ought to be looking for as we are trying to build leaders. And then for those of you who are aspiring to be great leaders, these are some of the criteria and some of the suggestions for you. The first thing I would suggest is let's not even worry about leadership development unless we can answer positive to these questions. So number 1, is the person you're considering already a great boss? There's going to be a lot more power involved in a position of leadership, and the last thing we want is some moron to be a leader and who's going to spread their moronness to the rest of the people in the organization. If they're a great boss, we can work with that. Secondly, is the organization healthy? I have worked with so many dysfunctional organizations, and what does not work is shoving people into leadership, because if the ship is sinking, it doesn't matter how good the person is, that ship's going to the bottom of the ocean. If your organization is not healthy, let's get it healthy first. And finally, do they really want it? Because the headaches only get bigger the higher up that you go. In fact, I've heard somebody say once, the higher you climb, the more people see your ass hanging out. So just understand that there's a lot of stress that goes on with this. Are you ready for it? And if indeed this is something that you want, then the 3 tools of leadership development, first one we would suggest, and you got to be careful with this, is what's called a 360 survey. Maybe some of you have done one of these before. I can tell you that if you do this, you really have to have some thick skin, because as great as you think you are, the 360 is going to reveal what people really think about you. And a lot of times it's not exactly what you were hoping to hear, but it's not what you want to hear, but maybe it's what you need to hear. So I would be very careful with these. These do take a lot of courage. The second thing is coaching, but the type of coaching would probably better come from a professional coach. And so I would recommend, if you're looking for a coach, look for somebody who has the ICF certification. There is a certifying body for coaches that actually requires you to take a training program and do 100+ hours of practice coaching, take a rigorous exam, adhere to a code of ethics. You could screw somebody up royally if you had a terrible coach. So make sure that you're getting somebody certified. And the last one we would suggest are stretch assignments. And that's a good way to assess a person and how they're doing. And if you're wanting to put yourself in this position, you could ask for a stretch assignment. You could ask for a 360. You can ask for a coach. But all of those are designed to help you get better. And we'll end our time together by just taking a last look at what we looked at first. But I did this a little bit differently for you. I think it better represents the difference between boss and leader. And each of these are good and valuable and absolutely necessary if you want your organization to succeed. So with that, folks, I am done. I have one last page in the handout, and this has just got some fairly generic information if you want to stay in touch with me. I do have 2 podcasts. Actually, I have HR Oxygen, and I have a second podcast. It's called Boss Builder Podcast. So for those of you who are really in that management realm, I would really recommend this one. It's on every major podcast app, and I've got some really good guests. I have a couple of psychologists. I have a guy talking about, he does forensic psychology on how to handle deviant employee behavior. So good stuff there. You can get a book that I wrote, free download there. For any of your organizations that want to get a seminar, something like this, I won't charge you nothing. The one I'd recommend is How to Be a Great Boss. It talks about some of those development tools. And of course, you can always reach us there on social media. So with that, I'm done, folks. I'm going to just stay online if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts. But I do want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend an hour with you today. So I'll leave it up to you, Maria. You can take us home.
All right, well, thank you, Mac. Does anybody have any questions? No? Well, Mac, I have a question for you. So I have been through your training a couple of times. And, you know, one of the interesting things is that I always tend to see myself, you know, especially when you do the stool. And,
yes.
You know, ironically, I think in my earlier career, I didn't realize this progression. And you sit there and you ask yourself, well, why do you always keep getting to this point? I think the hardest thing, and I'm going to ask this from two different arenas. So one as a director, who, and you know, I tether two different worlds. So I'm an HR director and I'm also a regional director. So, you know, on the HR side, when you're looking at an organization who is going through a lot of change, they're getting their feet when it comes to new senior management. But you have a department of people who have struggled for years. How do you help employees who have gotten to a mindset of where there is a strong lack of trust? Promises never were followed through on before. And these were things that happened before you even joined the organization. How do you help those people to where coaching doesn't seem to curb the bad attitude? How do you help them make decisions for themselves?
Well, ultimately, the decision is going to have to be made by themselves. And I think what you can do is give them a little bit of grace, right? Because typically in any big transformation, there's people who really want what happened before to always be the case. Other people want it to radically change. But amazingly enough, there are people out there who are comfortable when they're miserable. Because what misery does is it gives you the excuse not to have to change. And if every day is unhappy, then you have no reason to change the way you're doing. Changing your mindset takes a lot of effort. So I would suggest giving them a little grace at first, letting them know, listen, there's a new sheriff in town, things are going to be different. And at some point, if the attitude's not changing, you can safely assume that it never will. And then you have to ask yourself, is this the kind of person that I'm going to want as part of my team? And so if you want to know where that fits on a three-legged stool of great performance, I'm going to just assume that they have the highest level of skill. And I'm going to make the assumption at least they want to do their job. What you're talking about here, Maria, is a focus problem. And the thing with a focus problem is that you can certainly coach a person. If you want to mentor a person, you can. But if they don't want to change, then we're back to a will problem right here. And the only option with a will problem is either you change or you're gone. And so after that grace period, if you see no intention of changing, that person probably is not a good fit anymore. And there's no shame in letting a person go who's not a good fit for your organization. So I'm not going to tell you to lead with the threat. I would suggest you lead with the communication that a change is coming, change has come. There's not going to be the things that cause that lack of trust, but if you can't let go of it, then unfortunately we can't use you here anymore. And if that doesn't work, then let them go. I mean, it's a sad reality, but if you're saddled with it, you're going to struggle with it.
So how do you help directors who are in positions where they're on board, they truly do want to, you know, the focus and the will is there. Skills, I think, in an organization like we have, I don't think they've ever been provided a great deal of professional development. So these are things that are being built by the department. But what happens when you have a director who's very focused, very driven, but you have employees that have never been held to, the bar's never been raised. You've got this mediocre stand. I come, I do my job, I go home. How do you help the directors to help raise those bars so that they are not frustrated as middle managers?
Well, to the extent that they have control, it's going to be up to them to set that bar. And then we go back to this tool. Then we're going to say, okay, this is our standard right here. So the question is, as an employee, are you willing to gain the skill and the focus that you need to be successful here? What I would always discourage is lowering the bar to meet mediocre employees. Because let's face it, folks, there's a lot of folks out looking for work right now who in some cases are going to be a hell of a lot hungrier than the people that you have right now. Now, I would never advocate you threaten them and say, if you all don't want to do the job, I'll get somebody in here that does. What you want to be able to do is to provide the standard. And the way the standard works is this. This is my standard right here. This is you right down here. In between is this big gap. What I need you to do is to do these things to meet this standard. And if you don't know how to do it, I'll train you. If you want to do it and you're not successful, I'll coach you. But if you don't want to do it, I'm going to fire you. See, you can't argue with standards. So when you say somebody has set the bar, we want to know what the bar looks like. Because if people know what the bar looks like and the steps to get there, then they have the option to do it. But I would say under no circumstances do you drop your standards. Now, that could be a problem with the director that can't communicate those standards properly. In that case, the director probably could use coaching. And that's where we would look for the outside source to coach them. I have referred a ton of people to the coaches in my network who are in that very same predicament. So if that sounds like you and something that you might benefit from, let me know, because I can certainly refer you. But in the end, the people that have been successful working with my partner, Margie, they come out of it with confidence, with a better ability to communicate, and their team rises to the occasion rather than the leader sinking to the level of mediocrity.
Well, I think one of the things that we found from our in-service was a need for more consistency. People loved your presentation that you had given, but it was like it happened, and then when's it going to happen again? And so one of the things that's different in both of the worlds that I'm in is that the SBDC has required professional development. We're required to go through, an X number of hours a year, not only to stay on top of things for clients and to make sure that we're subject matter experts in the areas that we're professing, but it allows advisors and directors to be able to choose an area that they would like to be truly focused on. So like mine is HR and marketing. I probably lean more these days into the HR realm than I do into marketing, but because I have found a greater ability to help people. And so when I look at the college as a whole, I see directors who are needing some of this focus that is not built into their program. So as I help to redefine our HR department, and I look to help the employees in the department, as well as what we create in the SBDC when it comes to workshops and seminars, how do we bridge this to the college? It's hard when you have such a large demographic who are at all different spectrums. And so, trying to just get a little bit of clarity on that is good for me, because you can't be all things to all people. But at the same time, whenever you do this, I swear I see myself, in my own growth process. So I try to be very cognizant of that, not only when I'm helping employees, but when I'm also trying to guide directors in what they need to do to help their direct reports. So I don't know. I think when step 2 is always so beneficial for me, because it keeps reminding me and putting in the forefront the very necessary things that I need to do. And you were right. the chair, the stool can be used from a parent focus. It can be used from, you know, an employee or a director focus. So thank you so much for sharing this with us today. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to doing future things with you. If there aren't any questions from anyone in the room, our training is over. Please feel free to reach out to the SBDC should you have any questions or need assistance in your businesses. Mac, thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, that would be great. And listen, I appreciate all of you tuning in today. Those of you in the back of the room there, if you're still awake, thank you so much for being there in person. And everybody online, I appreciate it. So please have a good day and stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.